The noise of the annual festival at Shiloh is deafening. It is a time of public sacrifice, of feasting. Heartwarming lesson. We are taught that she was a woman who wanted a baby, prayed with great faith, and received exactly what she asked for. But the birth of Samuel is not the resolution of the story. It is the beginning of a countdown. The moment she holds the infant to her chest, the clock immediately starts ticking toward the surrender. The birth of a child is usually the joyous conclusion to a story of barrenness. But for Hannah, the arrival of Samuel does not end the tension. It introduces a completely different kind of agony. When the time comes for the family's next annual journey to Shiloh, the house in Ramah is busy with preparation. Elkanah is gathering the sacrifices. Peninnah and her children are readying themselves for the feast. But Hannah stays behind. She tells her husband, "I will not go up until the child is weaned. Then I will bring him, so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever." In the ancient Near East, a child was not weaned at a few months old. In a culture without modern formula or sterilized bottles, maternal nursing was a matter of basic survival, and weaning typically occurred around the age of 3. This means Hannah has approximately 36 months, 1,000 days. Every time she holds him to her chest, she is intimately aware of the countdown. The psychological weight of those 3 years must have been staggering. Weaning is inherently a process of physical detachment. We read it as a neat formula for answered prayer. If you want something deeply enough, and if you promise to dedicate it to God, a mother gently withdraws her body so the child can learn to eat solid food, to walk, to survive without her constant physical mediation. Ordinarily, this detachment allows the child to grow into an active, permanent member of the household. But Hannah is not weaning Samuel so he can run through her courtyard. She is weaning him so she can give him away. Every ounce of strength he gains, every new word he learns, every time he grows heavier in her arms, he is one step closer to the tabernacle. The very act of nurturing her son is the exact mechanism that will pull him away from her. It is easy to make a dramatic vow in a moment of intense emotional desperation. When Hannah was on the floor of the sanctuary, crushed by grief and accused by the high priest, pledging the child to God was an act of survival. But true faithfulness is not forged in the adrenaline of the crisis. It is forged in the quiet, mundane moments of the aftermath. Faithfulness is waking up in the middle of the night to soothe a crying infant, knowing that soon someone else will have to comfort him. It is watching him take his first steps, knowing you will not be there to see him become a man. It is the hidden preparation of a mother's heart, doing the ordinary work of parenting. The heavens will open, but that familiar version cleans up the mess. It ignores the scandal of the opening scene, while holding the terrifying reality of surrender. Elkanah agrees to her plan. "Do what seems best to you," he tells her. "Wait until you have weaned him, only may the Lord establish his word." And so she waits. The house in Ramah is finally filled with the sounds of her own child. The mocking of her rival has been permanently silenced. She has everything she ever wanted. She could easily rationalize breaking the vow. She could argue that God would surely understand if she kept the boy just a few years longer, or perhaps offered a massive financial sacrifice to the priesthood in his place. No one would force a mother to fulfill such a severe and heartbreaking promise. But Hannah does not look for an escape. The days turn into months. The months turn into 3 years. The process of weaning is finally complete. The boy no longer needs his mother's milk to survive. The time of hidden preparation is over. The day comes when she cannot delay the journey any longer. She packs heavy provisions for the road, a 3-year-old bull, flour, and a skin of wine. She takes the young boy by the hand, and she begins the long walk back to the place where her tears once fell in the dust. What happens when she finally reaches Shiloh, facing the very priest who once despised her, holding the miracle she is about to lose? The problem is not simply that the passage is emotionally heavy. The problem is that the highest religious leader in the country cannot tell the difference. The road up to Shiloh is steep and dusty. Every step Hannah takes brings her closer to the tabernacle, and every step requires a fresh decision to keep walking. She is holding the hand of a toddler. She is also leading a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. The physical sacrifices are massive, fit for a king, yet they pale in comparison to the true offering she is about to make. They enter the courtyard. The familiar, heavy smell of roasted meat and burning incense fills the air. It is the exact geographical location of her greatest trauma. This is where her rival mocked her. This is where she collapsed into the dust. This is where the high priest accused her of being a drunken fool. They slaughter the bull. Its blood is poured out at the base of the altar, a physical echo of the way she once poured out her soul, in this very place. Then, taking a deep breath, she leads the young boy to the heavy chair by the doorpost. Eli is still there. He is older now, his eyesight beginning to fail, presiding over a tabernacle that is rotting from the inside due to the corruption of his own sons. He sees thousands of pilgrims every year. He does not recognize the woman standing before him. So Hannah reminds him, between agonizing, earth-shattering faith and public intoxication, the system is blind. The priesthood has become so cynical, so detached from genuine spiritual life. Oh, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who is standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Then there is Relafly 1. Then she completes the impossible vow. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord, as long as he lives. He is lent to the Lord. The English word lent feels temporary, like borrowing an item you expect to get back. But the Hebrew text plays heavily on a single root word, shal, meaning to ask, to request, or to dedicate. Samuel's very name comes from this root. Hannah is making a profound theological statement. I asked him of the Lord, and now I have handed over what was asked. The child never truly belonged to her. He was always a sacred gift. And now she is returning the gift to the giver. Consider the agonizing physical reality of this scene. She has to pry his small fingers from her garment. She has to leave him in the care of an aging priest in a compromised religious system. She has to turn her back. And she has to prepare for the long walk home without him. 3 years ago, she left this courtyard with an empty womb and empty hands. Now, she is about to leave with empty hands once again. That when a woman pours out her soul in true worship, the high priest assumes she has had too much to drink. But the nature of the emptiness has fundamentally changed. It is no longer the hollow emptiness of barrenness, rejection, and cultural shame. It is the holy emptiness of a poured-out sacrifice. She has surrendered her most precious possession, trusting that the God of Israel can take better care of her son than she ever could. You would expect this moment to mirror the opening of our story. You would expect Hannah to collapse onto the stone floor, her lips trembling, weeping silently as the crushing weight of her loss finally hits her. The world would completely understand if she fell apart. Instead, she does something entirely unexpected. She does not fall to the floor. She does not weep into the dust. She stands tall in the sanctuary. She opens her mouth, and the silence is finally broken. For years, the only prayer the tabernacle at Shiloh had heard from this woman was completely silent. The high priest had to watch her trembling lips just to know she was breathing. But now, as she stands before Eli and hands over the 3-year-old child she waited her whole life to hold, her voice rings out across the stone courtyard. What follows in the 2nd chapter of 1 Samuel is not a mother's gentle lullaby. It is a fierce, theological war cry. This is the hidden contradiction of the story. Israel is in the chaotic period of the Judges. The nation is politically fragmented and spiritually barren. She does not sing about her own grief anymore. She does not even mention Peninnah's cruelty or Elkanah's extra portion of meat. The scope of her vision suddenly expands far beyond her own domestic dispute in the hill country. She looks at the corrupt, failing religious system around her, a priesthood run by Eli's wicked sons, who are literally stealing sacrifices from the altar, and she declares that God is about to turn the world upside down. She sings, "The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. Hannah has realized something profound. Her personal deliverance is a microcosm of how God intends to rescue the entire world. God does not align himself with the powerful, the proud, or the structurally secure. He operates through divine reversal. He takes what human systems consider strong, the heavily armed soldier, the wealthy landowner, the arrogant rival, and he brings them down. He takes what the world discards, the weak, the hungry, to the weeping woman on the floor, and he elevates them from the ash heap. But the most staggering moment in the song comes at the very end. Looking toward a horizon no one else can see, Hannah declares, God is preparing to rescue them, to establish a prophet, and eventually to anoint a king. But he does not begin his rescue operation with a military general. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. When she speaks these words, Israel does not have a king. There is no monarchy. The nation is a fragmented, chaotic collection of tribes. Yet she uses a specific Hebrew word for anointed Mashiach, which translates to Messiah. Hannah, a once barren woman, becomes the first person in the biblical text to explicitly use this exact word to describe God's future. Victorious king. In this moment, Hannah ceases to be merely a desperate mother. She becomes the first great prophet of the Israelite monarchy. Her song becomes the theological architecture for everything that follows. It outlines the exact pattern God will use in the very next generation, when he rejects the tall, impressive, heavily armed King Saul, and instead anoints a forgotten, dusty shepherd boy named David. God builds his kingdom from the bottom up, using the people no one else notices. The song establishes a truth that will govern the rest of the Bible. God's power is always perfected in human weakness. This prophetic song is so massive, so revolutionary, that it refuses to stay contained in the Old Testament. It will echo centuries later in the mouth of another mother holding another miraculous child. He does not begin with the high priest sitting comfortably on his chair. He begins with a broken woman on a dirty floor. But before we trace where this song goes next, there is one more detail about her relationship with Samuel that we cannot ignore. Because surrendering him to the tabernacle did not mean she simply walked away and forgot him. The journey back to Ramah must have been the quietest walk of Hannah's life. She had just left her 3-year-old son in a compromised sanctuary under the care of an aging priest. It is easy to read this narrative and feel a lingering sense of unease. A modern reader might raise a valid objection. Did God simply use this woman's trauma to produce his prophet? Does biblical surrender mean God demands we sever our hearts from the people and hopes we love most? Does he require us to become numb? The writer of 1 Samuel answers this objection with one of the most tender, heartbreaking details in the entire Old Testament. The text tells us Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod, and his mother used to make for him a little robe and take it to him each year. When she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice, Hannah did not stop being a mother when she walked away from the tabernacle, whose lips are moving in silence. Why does this deeply misunderstood moment become the exact catalyst God chooses to shift the entire course of biblical history? Her motherhood did not end. It was profoundly transformed. Think about the physical, sensory reality of that verse. Every year, she sat in her house in Ramah, measuring a growing boy in her memory. She spun the thread. She wove the fabric. She stitched the seams. She had to guess how much he had grown. A little longer this year, a little wider across the shoulders. An ephod was specifically a priestly garment. By making this little coat, Hannah was physically dressing him for his divine vocation. She poured her ongoing, fierce love into a tangible object, carrying it up the dusty road once a year, to wrap her son in the work of her hands. She surrendered him completely, but she never stopped loving him. This is the great paradox of biblical surrender. Yielding a desire to God does not mean you must pretend you no longer want it. Pouring out your soul does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop trying to control the outcome. It means you stop gripping the desire as your only source of identity, security, and worth. And this is where the ancient story turns into a personal mirror. What are you desperately holding on to? What is the unfulfilled desire, the broken relationship, the delayed promise of large families gathering to eat the peace offerings together? The air is heavy with the smell of roasted meat, wood smoke, and spilled wine. This is not ultimately a story about a woman getting the child she desperately wanted. It is a story about the terrifying, agonizing process, or the deep fear that you refuse to let out of your hands. We often believe that if we surrender our deepest hopes to God, He will take them away and leave us desolate. We hold our lives tightly because, deep down, we do not trust His character. We think our control is the only thing keeping our world intact. What is the pressure in your life currently revealing? Are you relying on the human comfort of an extra portion, like Elkanah's meat, to soothe a wound only God can heal? What have you mistaken for faith, when it is actually just a desperate attempt to manipulate the outcome? Hannah's story challenges us to stop clenching our fists. When we finally pour out the vessel, when we release the very thing we are terrified to lose, we do not find a cruel void. We find the God who specializes in filling empty places. The surrender is agonizing, but look at what it produced. Hannah gave up her son, and in return, the text tells us, God graciously gave her 3 more sons and 2 daughters. She received a full table. But far more importantly, her surrender produced the prophet, who would guide an entire nation out of spiritual darkness. Because when we finally release what we are trying to protect, God uses it to build His kingdom, of surrendering what we love most. Hannah's physical barrenness is a mirror of Israel's spiritual barrenness. Her desperation is about to become the blueprint. 1,000 years after Hannah walked down the dusty road away from Shiloh, the pattern she established in the dark finally reached its ultimate fulfillment. Another young woman in the hill country of Judea found herself carrying a miraculous child. Her name was Mary. And when Mary opened her mouth to praise God for the child growing in her womb, she did not sing an entirely new song. She reached back across the centuries and borrowed the exact theological architecture of the woman from Ramah. In what we now call the Magnificat, Mary sings that God scatters the proud, brings down the mighty from their thrones, exalts the humble, and fills the hungry with good things. It is Hannah's song, magnified. The ancient pattern holds perfectly. God still bypasses the powerful. He still brings salvation into the world through the surrendered wombs, broken hearts, and poured out lives of those the world overlooks. When we step back and look at the complete architecture of this story, 3 profound truths emerge from the dust. First, we see that true prayer is not polite religious repetition. It is the violent, undignified pouring out of the soul. Second, we learn that a divine delay is not a divine rejection. It is often the hidden preparation for a much larger redemptive purpose, for how God brings life out of empty places. But to understand what is really happening on the floor of the tabernacle, we cannot just look. And finally, we discover that biblical surrender is not the death of a dream. It is the agonizing but beautiful decision to release our grip, trusting that God can carry what we cannot. Israel received its greatest Old Testament prophet, its transition to kingship, and its prophetic vision of the Messiah, all because one mother was willing to let go. Think back to the opening image of our story. A woman has collapsed on the cold stone floor of the tabernacle. The air is heavy with the smell of smoke and sacrifice. The high priest is watching her in cynical judgment. Her shoulders heave, and her lips are moving. But there is absolutely no sound. At the beginning, those silent lips looked like the ultimate picture of defeat. They represented cultural shame, profound isolation, and a broken spirit, completely misunderstood by the religious world. But because of everything we have seen, that image is now transformed. We no longer look at her trembling lips and see a victim of domestic cruelty. We see a fierce, faithful warrior fighting a spiritual battle. We see a woman doing the agonizing work of emptying herself so that God can rescue a nation. We see the exact moment the history of Israel pivots toward its true king. This is where the story turns to face you. At the woman weeping in the dust. We have to look at the world she left behind to get there. To understand the profound depth, you may be sitting in the middle of a divine delay. You may feel deeply misunderstood by the people around you, or perhaps alienated by the religious system itself. You may be staring at a deferred hope, wondering if God has forgotten you in your own quiet room. This story stands as a testament that your poured-out grief is never wasted. God is intimately close to the brokenhearted. He sees the prayer you cannot even articulate. He is asking you to open your hands and trust Him with the thing you love most. The weeping on the stone floor is not the end of the story. The silence is simply the breath before the song. If this study helped you see the profound beauty of Scripture, please consider subscribing to the channel. Share this message with someone who might be waiting in the quiet for a breakthrough. Thank you for studying with us. Of her silence. We first have to understand the suffocating noise of the culture she lived in. Long before Hannah falls to the floor in Shiloh, she lives in a house filled with the sounds of another woman's children. In the hill country of Ephraim, she shares a roof, a husband, and a life with a woman named Peninnah. And Peninnah has exactly what Hannah cannot produce: sons and daughters. In the ancient Near East, a woman's value, security, and identity were inextricably tied to her womb. To be barren was not simply a private medical struggle, it was a public humiliation. It meant you had no social standing. It meant that if your husband died, you had no sons to protect you from extreme poverty. It is supposed to be the most joyful week of the year, but away from the crowded tables, near the doorpost of the tabernacle. Worse still, it was widely interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure, a curse. To be childless was to be erased from the future. The writer of 1 Samuel does not politely call Peninnah a sister wife. The Hebrew text calls her Hanazdara, her rival, her adversary, and Peninnah knows exactly how to weaponize Hannah's empty womb. The text tells us that Peninnah would provoke her grievously to irritate her, specifically because the Lord had closed her womb. Every cry of Peninnah's infant, every mealtime, every milestone was a physical reminder of Hannah's failure. This was not occasional domestic bickering. This was psychological torment, year after year, designed to break Hannah's spirit. The cruelty reached its peak during the annual journey to Shiloh. When it was time for the feast, Elkanah would distribute portions of the sacrificial meat. He would give pieces to Peninnah and all her children. The table would be crowded, loud, and full of Peninnah's offspring. But to Hannah, Elkanah would give a double portion, because he loved her. Though the Lord had closed her womb, Elkanah is trying to compensate for the silence of God with the volume of his own affection. He sees her weeping. He sees her refusing to eat the meat. In a moment of genuine but entirely misplaced comfort, he asks her. A woman has collapsed onto the stone floor. Her shoulders heave. She is weeping with a violence that shakes her entire frame. Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? It is a poignant question, but it reveals a profound misunderstanding of her pain. Elkanah thinks his love should be enough to fill the void. He assumes her grief is merely a need for validation, not a crisis of destiny. He thinks he can solve a theological problem with emotional reassurance. But Hannah's grief is not just about biological preference. She is carrying the historical weight of the matriarchs Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, women who also waited, in the dark, for God to open their wombs, to build the nation. Elkanah's love is a beautiful thing, but it cannot remove her shame. His double portion of meat does not change the reality that, in the eyes of her culture, she is an outcast. Human comfort, no matter how sincere, cannot fix a divine delay. The extra meat on her plate only highlights the empty chairs at her table. Elkanah's love is safe, but it is entirely inadequate for the scale of her suffering. And so, Hannah realizes that if she is going to survive, She cannot rely on her husband's consolations, and she cannot respond to her rival's provocations. She must bypass the human noise entirely. She leaves the crowded table. She walks away from the extra portion. She steps into the tabernacle alone, where she will make a terrifying choice. Her tears are falling onto the dust of the sanctuary, and her lips are moving. They are trembling, forming desperate words, pleading into the silence. Hannah steps away from the noisy feast and enters the courtyard of the tabernacle. The air is thick with the smell of animal blood and burning fat. The stone floor beneath her is unyielding. She falls to her knees, completely undone by years of psychological torment, and in the midst of this desperate weeping, she speaks a vow that defies all human logic. "O Lord of hosts," she begins. It is the very first time in the biblical record that this specific title, Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of Heaven's armies, is ever used. A shattered, marginalized woman fighting a domestic war she is losing invokes the supreme military commander of the cosmos. She prays, "If you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head." This is where the familiar, sentimental version of the story breaks down. We are taught that Hannah simply prayed for a baby and received one. But look closely at the precise mechanics of her promise. She is committing this unborn child to a permanent Nazirite vow. In ancient Israel, a Nazirite vow was normally a temporary period of extreme dedication, voluntarily chosen by an adult. It involved strict separation, including abstaining from wine and leaving the hair uncut as a visible marker of holiness. Hannah makes this extreme separation permanent, binding it to a child who, but there is no sound. Watching her from a heavy seat by the doorpost is an old man. He is Eli, the high priest of Israel, does not yet exist. This creates a staggering paradox. Hannah is begging God for the very thing she wants most in the world, under the strict condition that she will immediately give him away. Consider the practical, devastating reality of this transaction. If God answers her prayer, she will carry the child, give birth to him, and nurse him. But she will not get to keep him. He will not grow up in her house to provide for her security in her old age. He will not sit at Elkanah's table year after year to permanently silence Peninnah's mocking. After a few short years, she will leave him at the tabernacle and walk back down the road to Ramah, returning to an empty room. She is no longer praying for a biological trophy to display to her rival. She has moved entirely past her desire for social vindication. In her desperation, Hannah has aligned her greatest personal agony with God's greatest redemptive purpose. Israel is spiritually bankrupt. The priesthood is corrupt. The nation is desperate for a faithful priest and a true prophet to speak the word of the Lord into the darkness. Hannah is desperate for a son. In this impossible vow, the needs of heaven and the needs of a broken woman intersect. She is offering to surrender her deepest desire to become the vessel for the nation's rescue. But this level of profound spiritual surrender is completely incomprehensible to the religious establishment, which brings us back to Eli, the high priest, glaring at her from his heavy. He is the ultimate religious authority in the nation, the man whose sole vocation is to act as the bridge between the people and their God, chair by the doorpost. He looks at this agonizing, world-shifting covenant being made on the floor of his sanctuary, and he sees nothing but a drunk woman muttering in the dust. How does a mother actually fulfill a promise that requires her to break her own heart? And how does she survive the accusation of the very man who is supposed to represent God's compassion before we can see the fulfillment of the vow? We have to look closely at the specific Hebrew word she uses to defend herself to Eli. Eli's voice cuts through the silence of the tabernacle courtyard. "Put your wine away from you." It is a crushing accusation. Hannah is already carrying the profound shame of her empty womb, ground down by the daily mockery of her rival. Now, the high priest publicly attacks her character. In the very place she came to find mercy, she is accused of defiling the sanctuary. But Hannah does not retreat into the shadows. She raises her face from the stone floor and answers the most powerful man in Israel. "No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord." The English translation captures her defense, but the original term carries an intense physical weight. He watches the woman's erratic breathing. He sees her silent, moving lips. He evaluates her posture. And he makes his official judgment. The Hebrew word Hannah uses is shafak. It is a verb that means to spill, to drain, to empty a container completely. In the ancient Israelite world, shafak was a deeply visual word connected to the sacrificial system. It is the exact term used when the priests would pour out the blood of a sacrifice at the base of the bronze altar. It describes a violent, irreversible emptying. You cannot gather back up what has been poured out. Eli looked at her erratic breathing, her trembling lips, and her uncoordinated grief, and he assumed she had been taking something in. He thought she was full of intoxicating wine. Hannah corrects him. She is not full. She is completely, desperately empty. She is telling the high priest that she is treating her own soul like a temple sacrifice. She is taking the remaining fragments of her shattered spirit, her grief, her jealousy, and her unfulfilled desires, and she is tipping the vessel upside down. She is doing the work of shafak, draining herself completely onto the floor before God. Centuries later, King David will use the exact same image, instructing the people of Israel to pour out your heart before him, Psalm 62-8. But Hannah does not need a psalm to teach her this. "How long will you go on being drunk?" he demands. "Put your wine away from you." We usually treat the story of Hannah as a simple daughter. She discovers it in the dark. The contrast between the two figures at the doorpost is devastating. The high priest is accustomed to the institutional, organized religion of the tabernacle. He expects prayer to be dignified, recited, and orderly. But true prayer, the kind of prayer that alters the course of history, is often messy. It is undignified. It looks like madness to the religious elite. God is deeply moved by her raw desperation, even if his own priest is offended by it, humbled by her fierce clarity. The old man softens. He offers a sweeping, institutional blessing, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him." Notice the detail. Eli does not even know what she asked for. He did not hear a single word of her impossible vow. But Hannah no longer needs Eli to understand her. She only needed God to hear her. She stands up, brushes the dust from her clothes, and returns to the feast. She finally eats, and her face is no longer sad. The heavy burden of carrying the unsaid prayer is gone. She has emptied the vessel. Months later, the Lord remembers her. The agonizing silence of her womb is broken. She conceives, and a son is born. She names him Samuel, a name that echoes the Hebrew phrase for heard of God. The prayer poured out on the temple floor has become a breathing reality in her arms. The miracle has finally arrived.